Hello, and welcome to Ending Physician Overwhelm. I'm your host, Dr. Megan Mello. I'm a family and obesity medicine physician, as well as a certified life coach for physicians. In this podcast, we talk about how the learned habits of people-pleasing, perfectionism, and a lack of boundaries show up in our lives and how they contribute to burnout, exhaustion, and overwhelm. The healthcare system is broken, my friends, but let's not wait for it to be fixed in order to feel better. Well, hello, my friends, and welcome to another episode of Ending Physician Overwhelm. Taking a deep breath today. If you're listening to this in real time, recording in the late phases of January 2025, there's been a lot going on. There's been a lot going on in this country. If you're listening to me in the United States, I'm sure there continues to be a lot of difficult things going on around the world, as I know that we have some listeners in other countries. But what I want to focus on today is one little segment of difficulty that I am seeing a lot of in physicians that I know, physicians that I work with, and the sentiments of practicing medicine in this exact moment in time. This is not unique to this moment in time. I think it's just becoming so much more visible and in some ways more acceptable to talk about it. So let's dig in. I want to talk today about difficult relationships that physicians experience with their employers. And what I mean by this is not specifically the human beings who are in different positions in your organization. I mean your relationship with the organization that employs you in general, as though it was a person, right? Let's just call it an entity. Just makes me think back of the whole issues with corporations and Obama. I'm not going to get into that. That was a while back. But where I want us to start out today is thinking about what you expected life to be like before you went to medical school. So if you can, travel back in your mind and think about before you started learning really anything about medicine, what did you think your days would be like? What did you think you would spend your time doing? Who did you think would be around to help you? What resources did you have available to you to do whatever flavor of work you were doing, whether you were in clinic, in the hospital, in the operating room? I want us just to sit in that mental space for a minute of what did I think life was going to be like? And now let's come back to the present. I want you to think about your current job. I want you to think about what your day-to-day experience is like, not on your most fantastic day and not on the worst day that you've ever experienced, but just on an average day. Who do you have around you that helps support you? What are the resources that you have available? What is the flow like? What is your day like? The point of this exercise is not to drop us into a deep depression or cynicism or anything of that kind. I want us to notice that there is a disconnect between what we thought things would be like and what they are like. And without judging ourselves for having thought that things were going to be different, just notice the space. The reason for doing this is to acknowledge that we had some ideas that were probably lovely, probably, yes, naive, but not in a Not in a way that we need to judge ourselves for, just in a way that we can acknowledge and accept. You, before you started learning the practice of medicine, were different. Just by nature of you were not a physician. You had not completed medical training. You had not lived that life. And, with some exceptions, you had probably not spent your days in a clinic or a hospital setting. You didn't have an experience like that. We can't judge ourselves for having thought of, what our life would be like. Similarly, when we look at our current experience, we need to get out of judgment that the reason we are having the experience that we have currently is our fault. Because for many people that I talk to, and certainly for myself for too many years, I believed that my experience of all the difficulty that I faced, all the long hours charting and being buried in my inbox and completely overwhelmed, I thought that it was my fault, that I couldn't keep up, that I wasn't good enough, that I must have tricked somebody to get into medicine and then to get a job, right? I must have tricked my way through the bajillion tests that we had to take to get there, right? There is a part of us that often believes that we are the problem. And this is 100% magnified in many circumstances by our employers. Now, I want to have this discussion without resorting to cynicism and sarcasm and without a lack of hope. I just want us to see how often we are stuck in this position of thinking that we are the problem. Now, you are a human, you are fallible, you make mistakes. We do a fair amount of risk assessment and risk calculation, right? And human bodies do their own things. Human people make their own decisions and have their own behaviors, right? We are operating in a system where we have far less control, and by that I just mean the system of taking care of human bodies, not the healthcare system, but just the difficulty of predicting what humans and their bodies will do. So when we are struggling to feel like we can keep up with the day-to-day existence that we are in, if we are carrying the energy that we are the problem, that if only we could work harder, smarter, faster, everything would be peachy, then we are believing that what we are faced with is a winnable game. We are believing that the amount of work that we're given is reasonable, that the number of patients we're expected to see every day and the panel sizes we're expected to care for is a good idea. My friends, we didn't design that system. And I think any of us would look at what we are asked to do and shake our heads and say, no, that's not doable. But because we live in it and we've believed for such a long time that we should be able to manage it, it's very easy to get stuck in this place and think, I am the problem. That mindset is harming us. And there is a space between believing that we are 100% of the problem and feeling like we are 0% of the problem. There is space in between that. And it's very important for our long-term health and well-being, for our sustainability in our careers, to be able to understand that that's true, to be able to understand that, yes, there are certainly things that I, as a human being, that I, as a professional, can do better. Absolutely. Of course, there is. I'm learning things all the time. And no amount of book reading or CME courses is going to make the demands that are on physicians today reasonable. They are driven by insurances, they are driven by large healthcare systems. My friends, these are all for profit businesses, and their motivations as entities, the ways that they make decisions, are not focused on our health and well being. Now, ideally, they should be focused on the health and well being of our patients. And I sure that we can agree that that does not always seem to be apparent. And in many cases, it's egregiously absent. That is a different issue that we are not going to tackle today. But the health and well being of the entities for which we work is not in alignment with the health and well being of ourselves in the way that we typically have practiced it, that we are the culpable ones who are just not keeping up. That is harming us. And there are many instances, and unfortunately, very many instances that I could name this month that have happened to people that I know where the entity has really stepped out of line. Because these entities are so enormous, because they contain so many of us as employees and provide things that we highly value, such as benefits for our families, it's very easy to just feel like we are 100% subservient, that we have no choices, no agency. And it's true that we may not have very much negotiating power, but that's not really what's important when it comes to me thinking about you. What's important to me is for you to realize that your skills, your values, your expertise, your personhood are always going to be your number one asset, and they should be your number one priority. You want to be able to use your professional skills and expertise to take excellent care of your patients. And you have ideas about what those values are, some of which were formed a very long time ago, some of which are informed by the experience of having cared for so many humans. And those things are important, even though for many of us in employed positions, it can feel really far out of alignment with what we see today to day. That doesn't make us wrong. That is part of the broken healthcare system. And it's just important to recognize all of these facets, right? This mismatch between what we thought would be and where we are now, this trajectory where we believe very frequently that we are the problem, where we believe we have no agency. These things are harming us. And unfortunately, sometimes in very drastic ways. Physicians get fired for quote unquote no cause, right? Many of us have contracts that are written in such a way that there can be no cause termination, which means they are not required to say any reason why they are terminating you. And if you're scratching your head because this is news to you, I want you to go and pull out your contract and take a look, because that language is often in there. And it often is also written that you are able to, end the relationship. You can end your employment quickly. And unfortunately, you do tend to lose a lot of benefits and privileges when you do that. But it is possible for you to stop working. And it's really important that we hold on to that as well. That although we feel like we are at the beck and call of our employers, we also have incredible skills and values and value, and we have the ability to make decisions for ourselves that are in alignment with our values. This is not something that we talk about enough in medicine. And I think that we're going to need to talk more about it because the ongoing crisis of healthcare, where physicians and other healthcare professionals are leaving, the turnover is so high. That's harming people. It's harming us on the healthcare provider side. It's harming patients on the mistrust they feel because they're trying to navigate their own health challenges in big, clunky, non transparent systems where they feel like the healthcare team is a revolving door. There are very real concerns on both sides of that. But who's not helping in this situation? The employer entities. If you were to think about your situation differently, I want you to let your mind play around with these ideas. Number one, especially if you have just pulled out your contract to look and see if no cause termination is spelled out in there, I want you to see what, if anything, is in your contract, or think back if you don't have it in front of you, on what they promised you. When you were looking for a job, chances are you were trying to fit the bill for what they were looking for, but they also offered you some things, right? They offered you a salary or some other way to pay you for your time and expertise. It could be a fair deal, it could be not a fair deal, but they offered to pay you. They may have offered benefits. Certainly most physicians who are not working like a locums or a 1099, right, will have some benefits associated with their position. Functionally, they are marketing for you because by virtue of working for an employer, you typically do not need to go out and market your services to attract patients, right? In fact, you might be over marketed, but that is also a different story for a different day. There are, a number of things that come attached, as benefits for you on your side, but what else is in there about your day-to-day working conditions? Does it stipulate anything about call? Does it stipulate anything about the resources you would have available, the staff? A lot of those things are not typically spelled out. And there's a reason probably why those things are often not written down, but just take a minute and look and see if any of those things were written down and how that matches up with what your current reality is. What performance grade would you give your employer? Again, we're not thinking necessarily about the individuals who are doing the work. We're thinking about the employer as an entity. Are they living up to their side of the bargain? For this exercise, we are laying aside any cynicism. We are laying aside any judgment or any fears about, oh, if I left, what would my patients do? I just want you to think about this in a little bit of a dispassionate way for this exercise, just to say, how are they doing? The goal here is to be connected to those values that help to shape what you thought things would be like. Again, they could have been imperfect and flawed because they had not lived the life that you have lived, but you know how you would like to take care of patients, and you know where things are right now. So I want to know, what is the grade that you would give to your employer right now if you were judging them based on perhaps things that they, have promised, things that are in your contract, um, kind of the lived experience. If you were bringing a group of patients that you have cared for, people that you know, if you were bringing those with you to the employer somehow, like if you were cosmically attached to these patients and you needed a place to come and bring them with you, to get care, would you put them in this place? Would you say, I'm going to take this job in this location, and this is where I'm going to provide care for you? Would you do that? This is a really, really different way to think about our relationships with our employers. But I just want us to really notice here, how are they doing on their side of things? When you think about your values, your mission, and you think about their values, their mission, and their mission might be their mission statement, right? What they profess to be true, but their values are, how are things on the ground, right? The lived experience for working there, for receiving care there. What are you actually experiencing? If we look at it this way, right? If we are flipping the tables and giving them a performance evaluation, giving them a grade, how are they doing? And how does that line up with you and your values and your skill and expertise? This is absolutely a big picture exercise. And this is a way to really think about your relationship that you have with the employer as an entity. Sometimes we need to do this because sometimes we will notice that the trust that we have had for our employer as an entity has been significantly eroded. It's gone. When that's the case, when you no longer trust them, when you don't feel that it's safe to provide care in that place with the team that's there, perhaps, that is not a situation that we should stay in. And that might seem like an extreme example to people, but it absolutely happens. I can speak from an experience, and it wasn't probably the experience that most people know about. But I absolutely did need to walk away from a place that I was doing some work because trust had been fully eroded. And their behavior was, to be quite honest, a little bipolar. It was warm and fuzzy one day, it was cold and hostile another day, and a real flip flop. And it did not feel safe to provide care there. And I needed to leave, and I did. Now, is it possible that sometimes things could change? Absolutely. But I think many of us have had the experience of hoping things to change, of perhaps having difficult conversations and seeing things not change. We need to start really believing entities when they show us who they are. This is, as I said, a different way of thinking about our relationships with our employers, but it's really critical that you acknowledge when you've lost trust. And sometimes that is with an employer you've been with for a very long time. And maybe trust is recently breached, or maybe it's been eroded slowly for a long time. It may be a relatively new experience that you're in, and yet it still feels not right. It still feels at odds with your values, with the care that you know that you should provide or want to provide. It's really hard to be an individual professional and to do this work because it takes pausing, it takes reflecting, it takes really tuning into your values. And collectively, as a physician community, we have tended to have an absolute suck it up culture. This is just the way it is. Yep, if you want to be in medicine, you got to deal with all of this. And we all know that there are plenty of times right? When we are called into action because things are really going wrong with bodies, right? Um, Coding in the ER or in the hospital bed, um, a surgical complication, a medical complication that's life threatening. This happens, and we are called on to jump into action in an emergency for that, but with the intention that we would get rest, that we are not always the person who is indefinitely on call, because that is so unlivable and so unhealthy and so unsafe. And yet this culture persists of that's just the way it is. It's not good. It's never been good. It's still not good. It's not going to get good. But until we recognize our value and our values and see how they are at odds with the ways in which healthcare entities operate, things are not going to change. You know, if you think about what's going on at United Healthcare, where the CEO was shot and killed, and all of the downstream chatter that has happened with that, and all the cracks that are going on, the trust in United Healthcare as an entity, you know, has really been busted wide open on really all the signs that I can see. If people continue to choose broken systems and shrug and say, well, we don't have other options, these big systems will perpetuate operating as they are. This is not a diatribe against United Healthcare or really any one particular entity. But when big corporations can get away with understaffing, when insurance companies can get away with denying reasonable care, and we don't speak up and we don't speak out and we don't vote with our feet sometimes, the system will perpetuate itself. And is it the case that all of us need to leave employed medicine? Well, that sounds like a mess. But sometimes we need to really look at where we are and to really do this assessment. Is my trust in my employer entity so eroded that I can't stay there anymore? It's a big question, but sometimes the answer is yes. And if that's the case and you can identify it, then you can recognize that you have choice, because you always have choice. Sometimes the things that you value in your life in this current season are going to be that perhaps you are not going to choose to leave. Perhaps you are going to just need to stay, but in order to stay, you're going to need to make some changes. It's all complicated. It's all complicated. We need to really evaluate for ourselves where we are, what's going on, and stop feeling like we're broken. We are not the broken part. We've got so many instances where we can point and show that this is true, right? The many ways. And my goal here is, again, not to lead us straight into depression. My goal is just to help us see that we matter. And our view of what is acceptable when it comes to evaluating our employers also matters. When I look at people who have walked away from corporate medicine, from academic medicine, from salaried physician jobs with benefits, these folks have done this work of trying to figure out, what is the value that I have? What are my values? And they have decided that they needed or wanted something different. We all have that potential. And yet there's a lot of fear of security in terms of finances, and will I be able to get a job again in the future if I needed one? Fear of failure. What if I try something and it doesn't work? Fear of judgment. What will people think of me? There are a lot of fears that add into this. But you are a highly skilled, highly thoughtful professional. And it's really important that we allow ourselves to do the mental exercise of evaluating, how is the employer entity doing on their side? How are they taking care of or not taking care of my patients? And that we try and figure out, is this a good match? Am I a good match for, instead of asking the question, am I a good match for them? I want you to start thinking, are they a good match for me? We can all do work in taking better care of ourselves. We can all do work in changing the way we prioritize our health and well-being. But that won't automatically fix when there's a big mismatch between the values you hold and the values as they are practiced by the places that we work. This is complicated stuff. I think we're only going to see more and more because this country is in healthcare crisis. It's just ongoing. For your own sake, for the value of who you are, not just as a professional, but as a human being with wants and needs and feelings, I want you to sit in your value. I want you to understand that you are not broken. I want you to see that there are so many possibilities, so many different ways to do what you would like to do that may not seem like options, but they definitely are. Sometimes, yes, you might be in a life position where you say, I can't make a change right now. I can't do it. You know, I can't leave this, or this is the kind of position I want to be in. This is the place I want to be. I get to teach. I get to take care of this kind of patient. That's fine. But choose to take care of yourself and stop just hoping that things will get better. That is that side of the things. We can always do a better job in figuring out, how will I take excellent care of myself so that I can stay here, so that I can be in this place where I know how things are. I acknowledge, I accept that this is the way things are. And hopefully there's not an enormous mismatch in your values and theirs, right? Because that will be an ongoing problem. We need to have some trust. We probably won't have perfect trust, but we need to have some trust that things are good enough. But if you are finding yourself unable to trust, feeling that things are too far down the road, don't discount your value, your skills, your expertise. Don't continue to sit in this place feeling like you're broken, and if only you could just chart faster, right, that everything would be fine. It doesn't work. Charting faster is always fine, but it will not rebuild trust. It will not rebuild trust. My friends, it is hard work that we do. And it is hard work to wrestle with these questions as we just try and keep our heads above water. I don't think the answer is we all quit. I don't think the answer is that we stop practicing medicine. But we need to accept that we are not broken, that we have normal human flaws, and yet these systems were not designed to be livable. So what am I going to do to take care of myself? What am I going to think and believe about what my employer entity does or does not do? Is there space for our values to be enough in alignment that this is a reasonable place to stay or not? My friends, I'm going to leave you with these thoughts today. My hope is that this opens in your mind thoughtful questions and reflection, and allows some space for your thoughts and your feelings to trickle through. It's not easy to step out of your lived emotions and to think about this in dispassionate's not the right word, but in a settled, calm place, right? Not out of anger, not out of resentment or frustration, but just out of curiosity, just out of attention to what your experiences are, intention about what you want for yourself, and trying to find how you can make this a good life. All right, I will stop talking now. Until next week, take care, take heart, take great care of yourself, and we'll talk soon. Well, that's our show for today. Thank you as always for listening. To learn more about my coaching programs, head to www.healthierforgood.com. And if you love this podcast, please drop us a review on iTunes or support the show by clicking the link in the show notes. Until next time, take care.